Podcast, Episode 4. Why are people afraid to speak English?
Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we are tackling something I know a lot of you have sent sources in about. It's this fear of speaking English.
Right.
It's one of those things that people don't always like to talk about,
Right.
but it can be a huge e-hurdle for people.
Absolutely.
So we've got your sources right here, ready to dive in.
Okay.
And what really struck me was how both of them emphasize how irrational this fear can be.
Oh, it's so fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, we can logically understand that making a mistake in English isn't going to cause,
Right.
some global catastrophe.
Yeah.
But the anxiety, it can feel so real and so debilitating.
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
one source even pointed out that even native English speakers
Oh, totally.
mess up sometimes.
All the time.
Like it's part of being human.
Yeah.
But that doesn't stop the fear from creeping in.
Right.
And so for this deep dive, I'm really excited to not only understand like the WHY behind this fear, but to pull out actionable strategies
Yes.
from these sources that you can actually use.
I love that. And what's really interesting to me is how anxiety literally impacts the way our brains work. When we're stressed about speaking, our ability to process language actually takes a hit.
Oh, really?
It's like this vicious cycle feeding on itself.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into it.
Okay.
First things first, what are we actually afraid of?
Right.
The sources highlight some common culprits. Fear of failure,
Yeah.
making mistakes, especially those grammar slip-ups, and the big one being judged.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's push on that a bit.
Okay.
Why do you think these fears, especially the fear of being judged,
Right.
have such a grip on us?
Yeah.
Even when we intellectually know they shouldn't be such a big deal.
Right. It's like our rational brain knows it's okay to make mistakes, but something deeper is holding us back.
Totally. And it could be a few things.
Okay.
One source delves into how, for some people, language is deeply tied to their sense of identity. If you can't express yourself clearly, it can feel like a part of you is missing or being misunderstood. And then there's the cultural aspect, too.
Yeah.
Some cultures might emphasize perfectionism or flawless language more than others, making mistakes feel like a much bigger deal.
That's a really good point. It's like the cultural context adds another layer of complexity to this whole fear.
It does.
But here's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Both sources,
Yeah.
even though they come at it from different angles, emphasize this idea of changing our relationship with English.
Absolutely. It's about moving away from that feeling of deficit, what we lack,
Right.
and towards a growth mindset.
I like that.
Instead of I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
It becomes every interaction is a chance to learn and improve.
I love that. It takes the pressure off, right?
Yeah.
It's not about reaching some perfect end state,
Exactly.
but about enjoying the process of learning and growing.
Yep.
Speaking of enjoying the process,
Yeah.
one source had this really cool idea about actively finding ways to make English fun.
That's where the science of how our brains learn comes in.
Okay.
It's called neuroplasticity.
Okay.
And essentially, the more positive associations we create with something, the easier it becomes for our brains to learn and remember.
So if you can find ways to genuinely enjoy English,
Yes.
whether it's through
Yeah.
music, movies, books,
Anything.
whatever lights you up,
Yes.
you're actually making it easier for yourself to learn.
You are. You're rewiring your brain.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about the fears,
Right.
the mindset shift,
fix us.
and the fun factor.
Uh-huh.
But let's get practical.
Okay. Let's do it.
I know you're listening for some tangible tips to actually put into practice.
Mhm.
And you know what?
What?
Both sources agree on one surprisingly simple but powerful strategy.
Okay. I'm listening.
Asking questions.
Asking questions is brilliant because it takes the pressure off of you having to constantly produce language perfectly.
Right.
You're still engaging, you're still learning, but the focus is shifted away from you,
Yeah.
which can really ease the anxiety.
It's like a sneaky way to practice.
It is.
And one source even suggested having a few go-to questions prepared beforehand,
Oh, that's smart.
just in case you freeze up in the moment.
I love that.
Speaking of simple but effective tips,
Yeah.
another one that stood out to me was the power of smiling.
Oh, yes.
Sounds almost too basic, but
Don't underestimate the power of a smile.
okay.
There's actual science behind how facial expressions can impact our mood.
Interesting.
Even if you're feeling nervous, forcing a smile can actually trick your brain into feeling more relaxed and positive.
Wow.
It's a classic fake it till you make it strategy,
Yeah.
and it genuinely works.
I'm totally trying that next time I'm feeling the nerves kick in.
You should.
Now let's dive into a few more practical gems from the sources. They both highlight the value of starting with one-on-one conversations.
One-on-one conversations are less intimidating
Right.
than jumping into a big group right away.
For sure.
It's like easing yourself into the pool
Yeah.
instead of doing a cannonball into the deep end.
Right. That's a more manageable environment to start practicing in.
Exactly.
And within those conversations, there are some subtle things you can do to boost your confidence.
Okay, like what?
One source mentioned consciously slowing down your speech.
Slowing down is brilliant for a couple of reasons.
Okay.
First, it gives you more time to think and process what you want to say.
Yeah.
And second, it can actually make you sound more confident and articulate, which in turn boosts your confidence even more.
Plus, it helps the other person understand you better.
That too.
Another tip that came up was recording yourself speaking English.
Oh, yeah.
I know that sounds a little cringeworthy, but...
Trust me, it's incredibly valuable.
Oh,
You can listen back, pinpoint the areas where you're struggling, and most importantly, celebrate how far you've come.
right?
It's a concrete way to track your progress and see the improvements you're making.
Love it.
Remember, it's about progress, not perfection.
So true. And here's a really reassuring thought that both sources touched on.
Okay.
Most conversations, especially everyday conversations, revolve around similar themes and topics. So even if it feels like you're repeating yourself, you're actually reinforcing that core vocabulary and getting more comfortable using those phrases in different contexts.
You're building those blocks.
It's like building blocks for fluency.
Exactly. And building on those foundations is key.
I like it.
But speaking of building, there's another crucial element to this whole process.
What's that?
Building confidence.
Building confidence.
That's really what it all comes down to, right?
One of the sources went beyond just speaking tips and dove into how to tackle those underlying confidence issues.
Yes, because let's face it, technical skills alone won't banish the fear. It's about addressing those deeper anxieties and cultivating a genuine belief in yourself.
So what are these magical confidence-boosting exercises?
Well, the source suggests things like reading aloud,
Okay.
recording yourself.
We've heard that one before.
We have, and even performing in front of a mirror.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I know it might sound silly, but the idea here is desensitization.
Okay.
By practicing in safe, low-pressure environments, you gradually get more comfortable with the act of speaking itself. The more you do it, the less scary it becomes when you're out in the real world.
Okay. All of this is fantastic advice.
Good.
But what if all of this still feels daunting? What if even the thought of recording myself sends me into a spiral of self-doubt?
That's where the psychology of learning comes back into play.
Yep.
Sometimes the biggest hurdle to our progress isn't our lack of skill, but our own self-criticism.
Oh, that's deep.
It is. That inner voice that tells us we're not good enough can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
The source emphasizes the importance of being kind to yourself, taking breaks when you need them,
Yeah.
and remembering your why.
Your WHY.
Why are you learning English in the first place?
Right.
What are your goals?
Remembering your why is so important.
It is.
It's easy to get bogged down in the day-to-day struggles and lose sight of the bigger picture.
Totally. And sometimes a little break can do wonders for your motivation and perspective.
Totally.
Taking time to rest and recharge allows you to come back to your learning with fresh energy and a renewed sense of purpose.
I like it.
And that's something we'll delve into even deeper in the next part of this deep dive.
Ooh.
We'll explore how to reframe failure as a natural part of the learning process
Right.
and how to cultivate that crucial sense of self-compassion.
This is all so helpful. I can't wait to unpack more of these ideas in the next part. See you soon.
See ya.
Welcome back. Before we jumped into part 2, we were talking about being kind to ourselves, remembering our why, and using those as tools to help combat that fear of speaking English.
You know, it's easy to fall into the trap of comparing ourselves to others, especially in the age of social media.
Oh, for sure.
We see all these people online
Right.
who seem to speak English flawlessly,
Yeah.
and it's easy to start feeling inadequate.
Totally. We forget that everyone's on their own journey.
Exactly. What we see online is often a carefully curated highlight reel.
Yeah.
Everyone makes mistakes.
Right.
Everyone has moments where they stumble over their words. It's all part of the learning process.
One of the sources even reminded us that native English speakers make mistakes too.
All the time.
It's human. So why are we holding ourselves to this impossible standard of perfection?
It goes back to that fear of judgment we were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
We worry that people will think less of us if we make a mistake.
Yeah.
But the reality is, most people are much more understanding than we give them credit for.
I'd even argue that most people appreciate it when someone is genuinely trying their best to communicate.
I agree.
Even if they aren't perfectly fluent, it shows a willingness to connect and learn.
Absolutely.
And that's a valuable quality regardless of your language level.
Think about it when you hear someone struggling to speak your native language.
Yeah.
Do you judge them harshly? Or do you admire their effort and try to help them?
It's like we have this inner critic that's constantly whispering doubts in our ear,
Right.
telling us we're not good enough.
Yeah.
How do we quiet that voice and start believing in ourselves?
One of the sources had a really interesting exercise for dealing with that inner critic.
Okay.
It involves writing down all those negative thoughts you have about speaking English.
Okay.
Things like, I'm not good enough.
Right.
Or people will laugh at me.
Okay, that sounds a little scary, but I'm intrigued. What's the next step?
Then for each negative thought, you come up with a positive affirmation to counter it.
Okay.
So instead of I'm not good enough, you might write, I am learning and improving every day.
Okay.
Or my accent is a part of my identity and I embrace it.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's like we're replacing those negative tapes in our head with a more empowering soundtrack.
Exactly. It's about consciously rewiring those thought patterns.
I like it.
And it takes time and effort, of course. It's not an overnight fix.
Of course not.
But every time you choose that positive affirmation over the negative thought, you're strengthening that new neural pathway.
It's like building a muscle, right?
It is.
The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Exactly. And speaking of building both sources, emphasize the importance of finding ways to actually enjoy English.
Makes sense.
It can't just be about studying grammar rules and memorizing vocabulary lists.
It makes sense when you think about how our brains work.
Right.
If we can tap into that sense of enjoyment, it becomes so much easier to learn.
That's where neuroplasticity comes into play again. The more positive associations you create with English, the easier it will be for your brain to absorb and retain information.
So how can we make English more fun?
One of the sources suggested finding things you genuinely enjoy.
Okay.
Favorite books, movies, music, even cheesy TV shows.
I love that. It's about incorporating English into your life in a way that feels good and natural.
And think about it, when you're truly engrossed in a good book or movie, you're not as focused on making mistakes. You're relaxed, you're engaged, and you're more open to learning without that pressure hanging over you.
It's about finding those little sparks of joy within the language learning process.
Exactly.
It could be anything, listening to your favorite band,
Yeah.
watching a hilarious sitcom,
Yeah.
even just chatting with a friend who also speaks English.
Exactly. The more you surround yourself with the language in a way that feels good, the more natural and effortless it will become.
Yeah.
It's about creating positive experiences that will help you chip away at that fear and embrace the joy of speaking English.
This is all making so much sense.
Yeah.
So to recap, we've talked about reframing failure, challenging negative thoughts, finding ways to enjoy the process, and remembering our why. But what about those moments when you're actually in a conversation and the fear starts creeping back in?
That's where those practical tips we discussed earlier come in handy.
Okay.
Remember to ask questions.
Mhm.
Slow down your speech and remind yourself that everyone makes mistakes.
And don't forget the power of a smile. Sometimes that simple act can make all the difference in the world.
Absolutely.
But we're only scratching the surface here. There's so much more to uncover when it comes to building confidence and fluency.
Which is why we have one more part of this deep dive coming up.
Okay.
We'll be looking at even more advanced strategies for overcoming your fear and taking your English speaking skills to the next level. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into conquering that fear of speaking English.
It's been quite a journey so far, hasn't it?
It has.
Yeah.
We've gone from unpacking the roots of this fear to practical tips,
Yeah.
mindset shifts, and even the science behind how our brains learn.
And now we're going to take it a step further
Okay.
and explore some advanced strategies for boosting your confidence and fluency.
Love it.
Remember, the ultimate goal isn't just to speak English. It's to speak it with confidence and ease.
It's about owning your voice and expressing yourself authentically without that fear holding you back.
Exactly.
One of the sources had this really interesting piece of advice for achieving that.
Okay.
They talked about the importance of finding your tribe.
Finding your tribe.
This goes beyond just finding people to practice with.
Okay.
It's about seeking out communities or groups where you feel comfortable and supported,
Right.
where you can be yourself without fear of judgment.
Because let's face it, being surrounded by supportive people who understand your challenges can make all the difference.
Huge difference.
Yeah.
It creates a safe space to practice, make mistakes, and grow without feeling self-conscious.
Think about it.
Okay.
When you're feeling comfortable and accepted, you're more likely to take risks. Try out new vocabulary and push yourself outside of your comfort zone.
It's like having a built-in cheering section.
It is.
And these tribes can be found in all sorts of places.
Oh, yeah.
Online forums, language exchange groups,
Mhm.
even local clubs or meetups.
Don't underestimate the power of online communities.
Oh, yeah.
There are so many groups and forums specifically dedicated to helping people learn English.
Right.
You can connect with others who are going through the same journey, share tips and resources, and get support from more experienced learners.
The great thing about online communities is you can participate at your own pace.
Exactly.
You can just observe and absorb information.
Yeah.
Or you can jump right in and start conversations.
You don't have to have it all figured out.
Yeah. There's no pressure to be perfect or have everything figured out.
Exactly. It's all about finding what works best for you
Right.
and creating a learning environment that feels safe and empowering.
I like it. Another point both sources touched on was the importance of celebrating your successes.
Oh, celebrating those wins.
And I don't mean just the big milestones,
It's about acknowledging those small wins, too.
like using a new phrase in a conversation or understanding a movie without subtitles.
Exactly. It's easy to get caught up in the things we're still struggling with and forget to acknowledge how far we've come. Celebrating those wins, no matter how small, helps to maintain motivation
Right.
and keeps us moving forward.
So what are some ways to celebrate those wins? Maybe treat yourself to something you enjoy,
Oh, yeah.
share your progress with a friend or family member, or just take a moment to reflect on how much you've learned.
The point is to acknowledge your efforts and give yourself credit for the progress you're making.
I like it.
And this brings us to another crucial point that both sources highlighted.
Okay.
Patience.
Patience.
Learning a language takes time and dedication.
They
There
will
will be
agree.
ups and downs,
Yeah.
moments of frustration and moments of triumph.
It's a journey, not a race.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's okay to not have everything figured out all the time. The key is to not give up on yourself.
Yeah.
Keep practicing, keep learning, keep celebrating those wins, and trust the process.
Because remember, every step you take, no matter how small, is a victory. You're expanding your horizons, connecting with new cultures and people, and opening up a world of possibilities. And that's something to be incredibly proud of.
As you continue on this journey, remember that you're not alone.
Yeah.
There are countless others who have faced these same fears and overcome them. With the right mindset, the right tools, and a healthy dose of self-compassion, you can too.
So keep learning, keep growing, and keep speaking your truth.
Yes.
We're cheering you on every step of the way.
And that concludes our deep dive into conquering the fear of speaking English.
I feel like we did it.
We did it.
We conquered that fear.
We hope you found it insightful, encouraging, and empowering.
I think so.
Remember, the journey to fluency is a marathon, not a sprint. Pace yourself, be kind to yourself, and celebrate every single milestone along the way.
See you next time.